I'm Jean Parker, and welcome to yet another webinar of the collaboration between the Wilmette Institute and EBBF. EBBF, of course, stands for Ethical Business Building the Future. And our guest is, I think, going to explain a lot more about that in the course of this webinar. To introduce to you Daniel Truran, he is the Director General of EBBF. And so for the past 20 years, he explores ways for people to contribute to a better world and a better future by creating more meaningful workplaces. And he does that through the implementation of the Baha'i writings. And so that's a very important value, the Baha'i values, and advancing the ideas of the faith. He teaches social innovation in several business schools, and he is the co-founder of Impact Hub Madrid. In fact, he's based in Madrid at the moment, and he collaborates with B Corps through the B Lab of Europe. He is going to speak with us today about how companies can shift from being a problem to being a solution during and after the crisis. Daniel.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Welcome. Boy, do we have crisis around us, and boy, do we need some solutions or some good news to come out from somewhere. So as many of us work, as many as hopefully will keep jobs, enterprises, companies, organizations, we're just going to explore, is there a way by which these organizations can actually be useful? So often they're seen as the problem. Is there an opportunity, especially now, to rethink the role of business and to see if they can be a part of the solution? Just as a quick introduction, I said EBBF, and thank you very much, Jean, for making explicit the title, is a Baha'i-inspired global learning community. And so by global means we have activities in Auckland, New Zealand, New Delhi in India, soon more activities in the US, thanks to Ilona, who just started the North American area, in South Africa, so really global. It's a very exciting place where people learn and are accompanied. And what we are aiming to do is to explore the application of Baha'i values in workplaces and economic systems. So do not come and ask me about how government should work or about NGO should work. It's really the economic systems and businesses is where we focus as EBBF. Hopefully contributing to a more prosperous, just and sustainable civilization through our work. And so what we like to say that EBBF is ethical people who are building the future. I think we're pretty sure that none of us will actually manage to get that far, but at least we're contributing to it. At least we're exploring how this can happen. So people of all faiths are most welcome to join this accompaniment, this exploration, to see how we can try and build, or at least feel that we're contributing towards this better future. So what has been happening? Even before this series of terrible crises, companies were not doing very well. Capitalism didn't have a very good reputation. And I think what was starkly interesting is not Greenpeace or anybody else, is The Economist was questioning, what are companies for? The Financial Times, time for a reset. So I think that everywhere in all the media of all kinds, and especially the business ones, saying this is not working, let's look for something new and different and better, because this is really not serving not only a few, but nobody at all. So with that in mind, this very nice quote, what is your company's core reason for being? And where can you have a unique, positive impact on society? Now more than ever, you need good answers to these questions. And again, you would have thought that this is a quote from some beautiful, lofty NGO or ABBF or so forth, but actually it's a recent article that McKinsey wrote. So McKinsey was highlighting, and this is a really good article. You can see the link in the slides. We will send you the slides if anybody's interested at learning@ebbf.org, and we'll be very happy to send you these. I think probably you will see the slide. Thank you very much, Vahid, for mentioning this. So in this article, what McKinsey was making evident is how purpose is already shifting from the why to the how. And I see this, I've been engaged by a number of very large organizations. That's, yeah, ethics is on the website, on the CSR department. But people, leaders are right now really saying, you know, we feel we need to bring purpose, we need to bring a sustainable presence. We are really stuck, lost, and do not know how. So at least that's a progress. They know they should, they want to, but they're very lost in terms of how this can actually happen. And this article by McKinsey and many others are showing ways by which this can actually start to move forward, which is encouraging, I guess. But we are so far from being where we actually want to be, of course. And there's this part of my work is to also, I'm involved in this B Corp movement and B Lab, which is the organization that accompanies, that promotes this global movement of good companies, highlights this phrase that we are really right now. I mean, we could have lived 30 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, and this shift would not have happened. It is our destiny to be living at this time, and it's not an easy destiny to be in, but we are seeing things are happening now that were not happening before. And this historic global culture shift is underway to harness the power of business to help address society's greatest challenges and to build a more inclusive economy. Now, if I think about business, the first thing that comes to mind is not exactly this. And I think most of us will probably have the same idea. So to me, the shift is underway, is different from saying right now business is great, because right now business is not living to the potentiality it has. But I am seeing every day, and I'm working with organizations and companies and EBBF members that really are living this new sense of why do we exist as a company? What is our role in society? How can we actively move forward and have some the kind of impact we want to have? And this is the beautiful competition that these B Corps are doing, for example, which are a competition to be the best for the world. So it's a very different objective than you would have before about being the first, number one in my market, number one in sales, number one in whatever. Is being the best for the world, which has a very different reason for being. And these companies, I mentioned the B Corp movement simply because I know it, but there's other great movements which are doing very similar things. So this movement of the B Corps is actually measuring how much you're contributing to society, how much you're looking after your workers, which in some social enterprises, very lofty ideas, great ways forward, but they sometimes forget about the people that are working there and do not treat them as they should. Treating the providers very well, having a real impact in the community, being sustainable, having a transparent governance. These are 5 areas which are measured. So to actually get and become a B Corp, quite tough, but if you get there, this is what you're measured by. And this is a growing community, which again, gives me the kind of sense that this is progressing in the right direction. And specifically now within the COVID situation, I am seeing something that is even more evident. So the first calls that were made in EBBF, in this B Corp community, you really feel a sense, the first question that we're asked is, how are you? How are you as a human being, as a person? Forget your position, your company, whatever. There was this real sense of community that really came together, living coherently those values. This sense that together, we are a force for goods, but individually we're just separate entities which really cannot contribute as much. So that's an important area that's moving forward. I'll give you just a couple of practical examples. One comes from a company that's called Oxverity, and it comes in the article was printed on Forbes, and I'm not sure if we have the link ready there in the chat for you. But on Forbes, the article was not just a general article, but it's an article about the success factors of women entrepreneurs. So it's a series of articles that really highlights to me what is a really important point here, which is right now, women leaders are in the best position to actually move forward, address this crisis, and actually be much better during and after this situation. So what happened with this company? They're basically a company that sells healthy, organic, all the usual beautiful, sustainable food to offices. So we have a problem. The offices are now all closed. So who do we give our wonderful food to when we have no more clients? So you would think, okay, let's find for another customer, let's look for another market. But instead, this woman, Jessie Gould, said, okay, let's stop. Let's bring the whole full team together, bang in the middle of the crisis when everybody's saying, my God, what's going to happen next? And let's rethink our mission. Now, that's not the most obvious thing that you would do in the middle of a crisis, but that's exactly what she did. And they developed this new mission, which is not a very good marketing ploy, but you can tell it's really bringing together all the ideas of the people in the company. And now basically they've rethought themselves, and now they give the same great food to families in need. But to me, the key concept is, what do you do in a crisis? You go back to the why. Why are you there and why do you exist? And I also want to give you the example of big corporations, because big corporations are the first ones that people point fingers to, quite rightly so, but they have the biggest impacts, both if they decide to go in one direction, very bad impact, in the other direction, very good, and a lot of good impact. So within this example of a company that's super imperfect, another B Corp, Danone, so the chairman has really been a very staunch advocate of doing the right thing. And in the middle of the crisis, there's this Financial Times article that comes out. How can the company kept making yogurts? That's what they do, amongst other things, in a pandemic. And back in March, when everything started, they said, here are the guarantees I give to everybody. Your jobs are definitely safe. Your wages are safe until June 30th. So do not worry until then. We'll look after you and go for it. All the healthcare and childcare protection was extended. But also they added a 300 million fund for fragile suppliers. So it's not their duty to bail out suppliers, to help them, but they said, it makes sense. We are in this together. If you fail, we fail, which is a very common sense, logical thing to do, but just very few leaders actually think that way when they actually should. And also they have a bonus for people. So these are just some very quick examples of things that are happening. And having worked with this organization, and I gave a keynote at their kickoff, you really see from the inside how these organizations are rethinking themselves, aware of their imperfections, really trying hard to go out of that towards a new system. So again, there is hope there. But as Baha'is, the strongest hope comes from the writings, the Baha'i, the World Center guidance, and in this case, that this beautiful, beautiful statements, one of many from BIC, that was back in 2010, was sent out, and the link is there at the bottom of the slide, which gives the ideal. If any of us want to set up an enterprise, if any of us want to think what should be the real purpose of my company, BIC offers two purposes. The first one is develop the inherent potentialities of all the people working there. How cool is that? You think, I should have profits, I should, for sure, otherwise you don't exist, I should sell more, I should be more sustainable. No, develop the inherent potentialities of all the people in your, I would like to say, not just in your workforce, but also the people that are working on your providers, of your customers even. Really develop the inherent potentialities. How good are you at developing that? And that's a great measure of success. And the second one is contribute to the betterment of the wider community. So you can see, in a sense, this reflects what these other movements are trying to do, but obviously this goes deeper and really goes to the roots, to the spiritual roots, which really drive change in a way that's possible only by having very strong spiritual connections, especially in a time of crisis when everything seems to be lost. Having that unity that comes from that spiritual togetherness is most important. And that's where EBBF members and their Baha'i-inspired companies come into play. So I'm not sure if they're on the call today, but Oscar Ross and Stuart Lutine, they're two EBBF members, long-time EBBF members. They created this company called soul.com. You cannot get more spiritual than that. So great choice of name for an organization. And the whole idea, and Oscar is a Baha'i, Stuart is not a Baha'i, but he's probably the most Baha'i person that I know on earth. So people of all faith coming together, applying Baha'i principles. And in their case, all the strategy that they do, or the courses that they do, or the empowerment that they do is really in this concept of transforming companies into communities. So the company is not an isolated entity that works on its own, but it connects with the communities it operates with, internally and externally. This is a beautiful graph of hope, of increasing hope. And it comes from a release of control, control that seems to be such an important element of today's leadership. In a united, trusting leadership, you need less control. You create more possibilities. You increase the trust in people and of people. And on the left, you have action and progress that really comes from a reflection of what is my role in society? How am I now part of the community that I'm serving? So they're doing amazing work, and I've been doing this for many years. So it's not just something that happened today. And this is just one very practical example of how a company can operate according to Baha'i principles and being very successful at that. This is a company in Holland, and which is operating globally, but based in Rotterdam. So let me now take you to Costa Rica. And I'm not sure again if maybe Jose is on the call now, Corona Dorada. And there's a nice article that he shared. There's also a case study in case anybody's interested, but on the link of this Medium article, you at least get a sense of how a company, which is an IT company owned by Jose, well, it's a family business, and he just did a lot of changes to it. It's a fascinating story of releasing control and having other people take part. So an IT company that creates a spin-off, which is a social enterprise that works in the distribution and rethinking of the honey business. And this is just fascinating as a concept. So it's not just, this is my business and this is what I do, is really understanding and reading the reality around me. In Costa Rica, there was a job problem. There was a lot of resources which are not really used. With the honey business, for example, everything is exported and not so at a very cheap price, and then it's upmarket somewhere else, and all the resources are just wasted. So I said, oh, let's rethink the model. Let's work with the community. Let's work with the government, local government. Let's work with the university and rethink and create a new business from that. So that's where a company moves away or uses its talent to engage other stakeholders, to rethink its business, to be useful to society. And within that, creates a new sense of capacity and builds the capacity of people within that. So do read the article and do get in touch with Jose Soto if he's on the call, because he's just like the amazing thinker that actually started the whole process and that managed to involve everybody around them. And then what we have is other leaders within the BBF network. I think maybe some of you know Beppe Robiati. Hopefully we can get him into one of these webinars and he can delight you with his own ideas. And he wrote an article and gave another speech, which I'll show you in a second. Practical ways for entrepreneurs to manage uncertainty. You know, the worst thing at this time is that is not just the terrible situation that many people are dying, many people are suffering, that people are losing their jobs, but it's also what will happen next. Most of our minds is, oh my God, what's going to happen next? So a great leader, and he offers a number of examples, brings people to the now, to how can we work together to overcome this, to understand what is happening, and then to find the way forward to actually progress from here. So another article there you can actually learn from or explore new ideas and get some concepts from. And this is Beppe Ropiati, who also offered this great closing keynote at the recent Rethink Success EBBF annual conference. It was our 30th annual conference. It could not happen physically, and the board said, if there is a time when we should not cancel annual conference, it's now. So we came together virtually to rethink success. And Beppe gave a stirring final keynote. And I just leave you with this one phrase from him, where success, as we rethink success, can only happen when everybody is successful. And the way he explained, the way you can actually share the success, make everybody successful, really get people going, is a fascinating further example of how this can happen. And the how is one last element that I want to share with you. And this is where the universal participation that the recent, 2010 Universal House of Justice message really highlights. To me, this is a really important point. Is not waiting for one leader to get us out of the problem. Is not waiting for that department to make it happen. Is instead the kind of leadership that allows everybody to be part of the solution, to feel part of it, to really use each individual's talents and abilities and develop them further to build this prosperous world civilization. So the success of business is very closely connected to the success of the community around them. In fact, if you want to go back to boring numbers, B Corps on average sell 3 times as much as other companies in the same sector, because they're great companies, they're really motivated, they're with great purposes. So it's not either or, it's moving away from the binary. Either we're sustainable or we make profits and we grow. Either we look after our employees or we have benefits. Is working into this new systemic way of being, which is just powerful, attractive, and people love to work in these kind of companies. And this universal participation that the Universal House of Justice suggests does not just apply to one sector, but it's just so important that every single human being in that company feels their position, their role, and their talents are fully used. And as the last slide, I wanted to share with you the 7 core values of EBBF. You may recognize are obviously very Baha'i inspired. I should hope so too. And these are some, like sustainability, gender equality may not sound so, they're still so terribly missing, but they may not sound so innovative. But when we take to people the concept of human nobility, people pause for a moment and say, oh, okay, human ability, business, what does that have to do with it? But that's fundamental, recognizing the human ability of human beings, treating the people in your office in a certain way, expecting people to work in that same way is really important. The unity concept that's at the center of keeping everybody together and everybody involved, and the justice that goes through that. So this is a very quick 20 minutes, 21 in fact, in which I wanted to introduce the topic and then open for questions and answers. And if you're interested in this couple of slides and articles, and Vahid has done a great job in just sharing all the articles and links. If you're interested, there's just write to learning@ebbf.org, and we would be very happy to actually send you the comments. And Ilona, I wouldn't call the 7 values of EBBF. I think the humbleness of EBBF from its founder. We actually had a conversation with George Starcher, who founded the EBBF 30 years ago, and an absolute pioneer. And if there was one quality that he had that we hope we keep at EBBF forever in all the companies and members, is the humbleness, recognizing that Baha'i values make us stronger, but we are just a small little peg that are just exploring, trying to learn, trying to understand how can we be useful for society.
Thank you, Daniel. That was a very packed 22 minutes, I would say, very densely packed with material. A comment came indicating the 7 valleys of EBBF. I would say that's correct. So now we will entertain questions, both in the Zoom chat here, but also from YouTube and Facebook, where this is being simulcast. But I'd like to start us out with a question that actually came from the registration. And this takes us back, Daniel, to what you were talking about Jose Soto's company and trust. And so the company is, how can we promote collaboration among companies to share resources and innovate? And I would add to that, does that mean that we have to forego competition? Can they both live together?
Again, I take just because of my experience, I take the example of the B Corp movement, where people are competing to be the best for the world, but the way they compete is a totally collaborative way. They're signing a letter of interdependence, which states very clearly their role and the role of other companies. And especially in this time, I really saw how companies are working together. There was one company that has benefits for studies benefits and legal advantages, and they were offering free consultancy to the other B Corps. saying, you can do this, why don't you apply to that, and so forth. There was another one, a big logistics company, that said, we're going to offer there were 6 companies that actually distribute things, helping each other to go forth in a very human way. It's not just offering a service. That was the final outcome. The beginning was a conversation between human beings where they really found themselves in a very common situation. They felt there was something that was really aligning them, both in the issue they were facing and also what they wanted to achieve. And that's where these companies, these organizations, these people that come together under an umbrella of a value, of a purpose, of something lofty, find it so much easier to collaborate. Other umbrellas, which are in the pure competitive ego profit, find it very hard to compete. And nowadays, to collaborate rather, they just find it very easy to compete. And nowadays, if you do not know how to collaborate and change very quickly and have these dialogues of trust, you're lost. So now more than ever, this collaborative spirit that comes with trust, that comes with a common purpose, that comes with an elevated sense of why do I exist and why does my company exist, is most successful than ever.
Thank you. Another question from the pre-registration is, what are the virtues that are developed through entrepreneurship? When one becomes an entrepreneur, what are the virtues that are needed, and what are the virtues that become developed through that experience?
So the ones that are most used by the business schools and so forth are resilience and adaptability, which are absolutely necessary, even more necessary. And I think I just briefly touch upon this concept of the feminine leadership, is these new fundamental areas of empathy, of dialogue, of understanding, and of not just understand, oh yes, I understand, but really understanding what is really at the heart of why this person is not doing what they're supposed to do in their company. Why is this customer, what does this customer really want deeply? What is the deep connection that I can create? I think we've moved into this virtual world where that connection seems to have totally been lost. We used to go to the little market next door and so forth, and now everybody goes to these distant platforms that we have no connection with. So the companies that create that connection, the entrepreneurs that are able to really communicate that way, are the ones that will be coming out in the best possible way and being really useful. Are you useful to society? Why does your company exist? What's the use of your company? Is it useful or not? If it's not useful, you have to spend millions in marketing and so forth to actually sell yourself. If you're useful, you do not need to do any marketing, because people say, oh, this is such a great company. He's doing things that are really useful. I will pay for them, of course, because they deserve it. And therefore I will promote them, and your marketing costs go down. And it makes a total difference there. And the example is one of my hobbies, I co-founded the Impact Hub Madrid, which is a co-working space, but I'm not an entrepreneur. So how on earth did a non-entrepreneur create a space that's now 5 spaces that now thousands of people visit? Because I connected with other 7 people, and the 8 of us co-created this Impact Hub Madrid. So to me, it's also very important not to feel that I am the solution creator, I am the island of loftiness and elevated spirit. It's together, this universal participation, finding the kindred, the people that can be on this call, that you can find in EBBF, that you can find the women doing the same course at Wilmette. What are the people that have something in common with you very strongly, very deep, that you can work with, that complement you? One is a great salesperson, the other one is a great accountant. They exist. There's people that love accounting. Another is a great fundraiser. So working together with other people and the ability to connect around something of trust and of purpose, that's what makes you most successful as an entrepreneur.
Thank you. And there's a question now about men's and women's leadership and the differences between men and women's leadership. And related to that, the role of women-led businesses. And we've had a webinar previously about feminine leadership. So can you address that?
Roya Kavan gave the previous webinar, and she did a sterling job. And there's, if you go on Medium, you can see a summary, which was actually posted today, of just some highlights of the great keynote that she gave. To me, it's common sense, really. In terms of uncertainty, you've no idea what's going to happen next. You need people that have intuition. And if you broadly, and I'm generalizing here, but who has most intuition between a male and a female mindset? You know, people that are able to dialogue really deeply in an empathic way, and who has the ability to have conversations that go deeper. For example, EBBF member Dorothy Marchich, she was one of the first board members of EBBF quite a few years ago, and she wrote one of the bestsellers for the New York Times. The book was called, I think it was like 20 years ago, Managing with the Wisdom of Love. That's 20 years ago. And just shows the kind of pioneering spirit of somebody like her. And she was able to bring love into the boardroom in such a compelling, intelligent, obvious way that, oh yeah, of course we need love in the boardroom. But only a woman or a female mindset, which is also present in men, of course, is able to actually have that kind of communication, that kind of deeper understanding of what is really necessary, and able to mention names and to live, not names, concepts such as love or unity or really deep collaboration. Collaboration is not that I give you something, you give me something. That's not collaboration. It's the reciprocity, the deep understanding of why everybody is in this same company.
And what about women-led small businesses? A lot of micro businesses, home-based businesses are led by women. What is their role specifically in this crisis? And before you answer that, Jose, I realize you asked a question in the chat. Could you restate that, please? It got cut off. Thanks.
Oh, great. So Jose Soto is on the call. You can see him there. So I did mention very, very briefly.
Just re-ask your question, please, Jose.
So double heroes, because at the same time, right now, especially right now with the crisis, the homeschooling that we're all suffering. Of course, it's a wife that has to do the homeschooling. It doesn't matter that the wife is the director general of whatever. It's just still in the mindset of people, the role of female leaders is still also to look after the family and so forth. It sounds so archaic, so old, so illogical, but we are still falling back in that situation. In terms of crisis, we fall back to the worst and we go up to the best. And it's interesting how both are happening at the same time, and we're seeing some traits that really should go away. So if I had to bet on an enterprise, I would definitely invest in an enterprise that is going to last for longer, no doubt, with the same capacities, abilities, market. I would invest in one or more female leaders. I mean, ideally, I would invest in a gender balanced organization, but if I had to choose, it would definitely be a woman CEO as opposed to a male CEO. But we need to create the conditions. So in some countries of the world, there's this way by which, even fatherhood, in Scandinavian countries, it's the same. The father and the wife can have X amount of weeks off. So we should really build the kind of structure, the kind of laws that give the equal chance to women and men to shine and to develop the best opportunities. Right now, that's not the case. So women, female leaders are double heroes by being the best, but also the most demanded, or the most have the most demanding role because of this dual situation. And I think we should lead the way. We should lead the way now, but we should just see that it is possible to actually work together as a family, treat both in the same way, and allow this full potential to be developed. And maybe if people see our families or some good examples, it can work, it does work, let's do that. Because it's so easy to just instead point at the finger at all the things that are wrong, and there's so many. I feel very strongly that we should be trying to live in a coherent way and be successful at it as well, to see, there is another way, that's a better way, let's follow that.
Thank you. And Jose's question has to do with becoming a resource of unity. There's a lot of discourse going on in the world on virtually every subject imaginable. A lot of it is in the business sphere. And so the question is, how can we assert a climate of unity and advance that in the discourse, but then also in the implementation of whatever comes next?
So practical example, Jean Vahid and myself, we're in this EBBF learning group. And I cannot think of three more diverse people to be put into a group, say, oh my God, how do I create unity within this? And here goes the feminine leadership of Nabil Elias. I know he's not a woman, but he has very feminine capacities that brings us together, that allows us to work together. And it's not just the three of us, there's 8 members of this team. And it's just so beautiful to see unity in action. And how does it do it? Through a humble leadership that brings us together, that gently suggests conversation, that has really deep consultations, that does not rush through things, that allows everybody to have a role. With this humble leadership of Nabil is just a perfect example of how he leads very much, reminding us, giving us updates, keeping everybody informed, but allowing everybody else to be a protagonist of this. You will rarely see Nabil protagonist of everything. I think he gave a talk a couple of weeks ago, but that's about it. And he gives a beautiful couple of courses. But that's just the beauty of unity. Unity happens when you release control, when you trust people around you, when you allow them to grow, and you create this beautiful atmosphere where I'm really looking forward to next Tuesday's EBBF learning call. So it's not, oh, I'm going to go to a call. I'm really looking forward to that call. So to me, those are just some characteristic of a leader like Nabil, feminine traits he has in his male mind that really make it such a great, create such a great environment. And that's important anytime during a crisis, and I really fear that this is not the only crisis that's going to happen. This is the beginning of a lot of worse things to happen, is understanding what's out there together, not just Nabil telling us, guys, I now understand what we should be doing, that's the action. No, let's understand together the situation. Let's take actions together and come forward with the right way forward.
That goes back to this idea that what we're calling feminine leadership isn't necessarily about women, or isn't always about women, and masculine leadership, I'm saying that in quotes kind of, isn't necessarily about men, that either gender can promote any of those leadership styles. But is it a continuum? Are there places that where it isn't one or the other, but it's sort of in between? Is it a continuum of leadership styles?
And again, the Baha'i faith is very clear. You know, the two wings of the bird that we keep using as a metaphor. We don't talk the Me Too, women go first principle. It's called gender equality, giving equal opportunities to women and men to perform, to be the best, to actually be in a position of expressing their best selves. So to me, from a Baha'i concept, is really bringing this balance up. Right now, I think it's very evident that the balance is not there. I mean, there's a flurry of articles, of case studies, of stats, of numbers that tell you that women leadership and women companies work best. But then there's also, if you look at the impact, even the impact investing world, not just the deep investing, still investment goes mainly to male-led companies. So despite all the stats, despite all the data, we're really not there yet. And to me, that's where we need to try and humbly show, you know what, look, this company is actually working really well with purpose, with values, with feminine leadership, working with men and going forward. A really beautiful case of another BBF member, Denise Comella, who became a Baha'i through BBF. Actually, she didn't know the faith, and she got, oh, I like this BBF thing. And what is it? What does B for Baha'i? What does it mean? And now she's very, very active. In fact, she's in charge of external affairs of the Italian Baha'i community. And many, many years ago, when she was not a Baha'i still, doesn't matter, she was at Lush. Lush is a cosmetics company, a very organic, a very fun, a very values-driven company, and she was made CEO of the company. She deserved it. She worked hard. She was really good at it. And she said, no, I do not want to be CEO. I want to be co-CEO with my fellow male partner. So what male mind would have said, I am being made CEO, I deserve it, I go ahead and I lead the world? She didn't, in a very feminine way. Yes, thank you very much, but I feel better if, and nobody asked us to do that, if I can co-lead with this male. And to me, that's exactly what we're aiming for. Not, we need women power now. Yes, yes, yes. We said their traits are very good, but even better, women and men working together to create the best companies ever.
Okay, I am going to switch gears a little bit, and Vahid, if you can relay to me the questions in the Q&A and from YouTube and Facebook, please. The arts, one of your favorite topics, I know. What is the role of the arts and business? Some people think those are kind of incompatible. Others of us disagree. The role of business and the arts in managing through not just this crisis, but crisis in general.
So bringing it down to the very superficial level, I know I can see a number of you were at the BBF the virtual BBF annual conference, and we had a Zumba. So as you do in business conferences, so everybody started to dance, and an amazing female entrepreneur made us all dance in all our various little windows on Zoom. And what happened afterwards, we were smiling, we were laughing, we were just feeding together. And I know this is a really basic concept, but what is interesting is what happened by not thinking of a business decision, not thinking of how could save the world, just using the arts. And it can be music is a beautiful element, dancing. If you can move, usually it's a very good one. If you can actually be part of the artistry, that's really interesting. So I think it's really important, especially in business, which too often is so cold, inhuman, and therefore takes very cold and inhuman decisions, that we make it more human through the intelligent use of the arts. So it's not as if everybody now goes and draws a picture and, we're artists. That's not the concept I'm thinking of. I'm thinking of elevating the spirit of the being together, where everybody contributes a part. It could even be, on the wall of the office. Will we ever go back to an office? Who knows? But in case there will be offices, on the wall of the office, everybody brings the photo of something that's relevant or that touches them or a place they've been. Just looking at that wall every day, you can see the beautiful photographs of people that have been in different places. So that's one form of art that really allows more people to be present on more levels than just a pure cold business decision-making, yes or no, binary, profit, non-profit side. And it's amazing what happens in those kind of companies where art is intelligently brought within the decision-making process.
Thank you. And yes, Vahid, if you would share the Q&A queue questions, that would be helpful. One thing that is related, first of all, the person who did that session is on the call and thanks you for her,
Anila, yes.
A mention. Yes, I suspect a lot of people are clapping just now. Thank you.
Anila, can I ask you to also put the link to your shenanigans, because the fun bits on the side. This woman is amazing. She does these Zumbas and she did Bollywood. I have everybody on stage at one on past conferences, but she's a great social entrepreneur, and she's really delivering the whole concept of female education, female leadership. So Anila, I'm not sure if you can put, there we go. Thank you, Shanan's, where fashion meets education. So this is a living example of how right now, not tomorrow, right now, or in fact, 40 few years ago, Anila and her sister created this company to really bring forth not just selling fashion and clothes, but actually to bring a new mindset. And that to me is the ideal company that creates stuff, makes a profit, and changes the mindset and is useful to society. How obvious? Sorry, Jean, I interrupted you.
No, you didn't interrupt me at all. There's a question here about self-interest versus pure intention, the role of pure intention versus self-interest.
That's pretty evident, especially now. Self-interest is a company saying, "I'm going to save myself," or "I'm going to, give money to the most important people," and the most important people, your employees and your providers. Then is self-interest in the interest of others as well. So again, we should move away from the binary, either self-interest or the good of the world, because a company has to exist and remain in existence. So if you cannot just be lofty and ideal, and that's why unfortunately so many very spiritually driven companies fail, because they fail to create a business model that supports the organization then allowing it to have a great impact. And if we just rely on the spiritual area, it's going to be a very lofty but very short-lived company. So to me, moving away from the binary into this more systemic, holistic thinking, that how can I do good by also doing well, not either or, but ultimately, why do I exist as a company? And having these benefits, having this intelligent self-interest, if you like, allows you to then serve the whole. And I think I always mention the famous Chinese proverb that is mentioned on all airlines. Will there be airlines in the future? Which is, in case of an emergency, always remember to put the oxygen mask on yourself before helping others, which does sound pretty much common sense as well, that unless you have oxygen and you can survive, you cannot help anybody else. So again, let's move away from binary. Let's embrace the systemic.
Yeah. The question was actually clarified as enlightened self-interest. Would you say that's the same thing as intelligent self-interest?
That's I think the person that asked the question is far brighter than me and actually understands what that means. To me, if I read enlightened self-interest, it's probably that. It's I want to make sure that I'm serving, and the service that I do is of a higher nature. The whole self concept always worries me a little bit, because self is like a boomerang. It just revolves around yourself. And it's harder for others to work with you, to be with you, if you're thinking of your self-interest. So to me, the word self is not necessarily ideal. It's more about a global interest. And as the BIC was saying, it's just making sure we develop in the best possible way all the capacities of the people around us. So if you like, looking out of their self-interest to then serve the higher interest. But it's not my interest that I'm looking into. It's not self, and I don't care how enlightened it is. It's really a whole system interest. And Mike, again, I'm sure I'm doing no justice at all to your concept, which I'm sure was really great, but that's my understanding of it in a very quick reply.
Okay, now we have a couple of questions about the market and shareholders and achieving a balance. So the first question is about market mechanisms and how could the market mechanisms work better with trust rather than competition?
So everything is changing so fast. So first, there was one economic system, the capitalist system, or well, there was a communist and the capitalist. The communist didn't work very well, and the capitalist was left. And now we have like 30 or 40 economic systems. We were mentioning before the orange economy for the culture and so forth, the purple economy, the blue economy, the green economy, the B Corp economy, the economy of the common good economy. It's just like amazing how many new, and it's obvious because the old economy did not work. And so we're now creatively, any one of us, Gene, you could write a book about a new economic system, a couple of YouTube videos, and then a new economic system is born. Same thing with financials. We now have crowdfunding, crowd lending, crowd investment. The whole area of impact investing is like changing so fast. So to me, it's so many new things are being created that I think it's our duty to understand which one of those can be a stronger lever to make the change we want to make happen, embrace it, underline it, and use it, and going so forth. The old system was really, it didn't work. And I showed that, the Financial Times economists, everybody was agreeing that that one didn't work. So I would not even go back in this dividend on dividend. That's really old. It doesn't really belong anymore. It still belongs today, but I think when we create our companies and go forth, we need to look in a different way. So if we are still today in a company and you have to decide, should I pay dividends, yes or no? To me, it's who are the most important stakeholders for you, and you should make a decision about it, and you should make a statement about it. So I am not going to give dividends to investors, for example, or I might give dividends to impact investors and not to other investors. So to me, we need to be intelligent in our decisions, not in just making the decisions, but making explicit the reasons why we're doing that, and thus building a movement around what we're saying and doing makes sense. And investors, at the end of the day, what they want you to be in business. They want you to continue for a longer time. So it's in their interest to actually put you in a position where you're serving and giving money to the people that will sustain the in this for a longer time.
This is related to the next question, which is about shareholders and how can we influence shareholders to actually make those demands of companies to be more sustainable, to be more responsive to labor relations and well-being of workers and all of that.
Ask Jenna Nicholas.
Yeah.
Jenna Nicholas is another amazing EBBF member that we're so fortunate to have, and she's been pioneering.
I wish she was here. I would ask her.
She might be. In case, if you're there, just write the answer,
Jenna,
please.
speak up.
Jenna, speak up. So basically, she's been a pioneer of this impact investment for like ages ago. She worked with the first impact investment funds, and she worked in funds that were working in China when China was still not quite open. So she really has a very global way of going forward. So I'm a big fan of not going upstream and peddling and just making it hard for you. I'm a big fan of going downstream, because if one paddle going downstream makes you go much further down. So I guess it's lazy or whatever it is. I just prefer it that way. So I would go and look for the kind of investors that really make sense to the kind of company I want. And right now, Jenna will tell you, there's never been such a huge amount of diverse investors that are not just interested in the old, but interested in the new way of financing, which is both having a return, which is necessary, it's a must, it's not an optional, and also one is having this impact on society that will just keep you sustaining for the future. It's very simple. You have a product or service that nobody needs. The amount of money you need to invest in marketing is huge. And at the end of the day, never mind how much marketing you do, there will be no more business going. Unless you have something else that really sustains you, you will not be in business. If you don't have any use for what you're doing, if it's not useful, if it's not interesting, especially nowadays, we're moving further and further away, despite what seems to be the chaos at the moment, towards only the stuff that's useful survives. Everything else has a very quick up and down, and disappears, and it's out of the way. So that is the normal, logical way to actually go in the future, and making these open statements about the why you're making certain decisions, why you chose this specific investor, why the whys are very important to just create your story, create your substance, and just show, oh, this person is coherent. It's not they said, oh, I said not to give any dividends, that's it. So is this person crazy? You need to create a coherence, a reassurance of this is your plan. This is why you're doing these things. This is what you want to be in X amount of time.
The question about how can one employee in a large company make a difference? And this is something that we deal with all the time at Wilmette in our business and economics courses, as well as in education. And I know that EBBF, we have that discussion also. You know, you've got one person who's working in a large company and perceives themselves as the only person who thinks a certain way and who has values that they want to bring to their employment and to their the mission of their company. But they often feel disempowered. That's what I hear in the classes that I teach at Wilmette. They feel disempowered, they feel discouraged, they feel unable to really enact any kind of meaningful or substantive change. So do you have any pieces of advice or wisdom about that?
Such an imperfect world we work in, such imperfect workplaces. I know. So that's why exactly these EBBFs, B Corp, Wilmette, these organizations exist. What you want is you do not want to be alone. That's the worst part, that you feel I am the only one. And that's the kind of thing that I've been asked most often. It's kind of interesting because we are not the only ones. We think we are the only ones, but our conversations limit the knowledge of who's actually around us. And I remember a situation that happened quite a few years ago. The director of marketing at Procter & Gamble, he was actually an ordained priest, an Anglican priest, which kind of surprised everybody. And he thought he was the only one, so he was keeping really quiet about it. And then in a social dinner, he actually found out that two people on the same floor of the director of P&G one was a very firm Buddhist, and the other one was a very staunch Jewish individual. And that's such a beautiful spiritual conversation. And they've been working together for years and nobody really knew each other in that sense. So, first thing, do have meaningful conversations with your colleagues, with the people around you. They're human. I know it sounds surprising, but there's human beings around you, and they do have the same wishes that you, not the same, everybody's different, but they do have something very common to you in many phases. And again, that's where the feminine is usually better at this, of finding out who the people around you really are, and then moving from an island at least to an archipelagos within the company. But that's where you need to be explicit, not like, hey, I'm up high, I'm values based. That's not really the explicit I'm thinking of. It's just, in this decision, what's really important to me is justice. And the reason why justice is important, because it brings me happiness. And you can have conversations which are really beautiful, that really bring, oh, so who doesn't want justice in a company? Who doesn't want this? So I think where we are lacking, and I am one of them, is the ability to have the conversations with people around us that bring out the commonalities in people, from which you can start to do projects together. And to me, is enjoying experimenting. The worst that can happen is usually nothing at all, and we worry so much about the worst that can happen. So find individuals that are like-minded within the organization, or at least outside the organization, that can help you bring things forward. Then do small projects, do prototypes, make them very successful. People love success. And with that success, they will actually come in and say, oh, how did you do it? I want to do that too. And from that, you can at least bring the hope of something different. I think the importance that we work within four walls, sometimes the very physical walls, and sometimes the mental walls that we create. Within those four walls, there's so much that we can do. The first thing being ourselves, our real selves, not being a mask and being accepted by everybody else, not being a weirdo that just goes crazy, but being our coherent self is the first step to actually, within those four walls, start to operate, make something happen, and enjoy every little thing that works. And if that still doesn't work, guess what? There's lots of fish in the sea. So you can definitely leave your organization and go for something more meaningful. And within EBBF, I have thousands, literally, of stories of people that said, yeah, that's enough. In fact, our success rate at EBBF events is that on average, 10% of people that come in EBBF events leave their jobs when they leave the event. So I'm not sure if it's a success factor or if we're destroying people's lives, but they come there, and it's not just EBBF, of course. It's, these kind of organizations and meetings, they understand, now I understand what I was supposed to be doing. That's not it. I go for something else.
Thank you. And this is possibly our last question, although we'll see how verbose you get on this. We are obviously not able to get to all of the questions, but I do hope that they have been representative of the questions that people have. And this has to do with using the language of art. Someone some time ago here asked this question about the language that we use in business and in monetary and business discourse. What is the role of the language of art? How can we promote it? How can we make it more of a part of how we describe things and how we talk about things?
How depends on us and the people around us. So like Anila manages to make absolutely everybody dance. And we could not do a video for respect of everybody, but the most amazing diversity. In fact, I had my 14-year-old daughter dancing with me. So Anila can do magic. Everybody else, we should do what we are comfortable with and what our environment is comfortable with. So sometimes you cannot bring certain things that do not make any sense. Oh, they sound really good in a 19-day feast, or they sound really good in this beautiful spiritual element, but in my office, they would never work. So be clever. See what kind of art brings the conversation forth. And even in a meeting, it can be something really simple and creative to start off with. And that was nice. I'll have more of that. So people are resisting change. The metaphor that I use is usually, oh, we have to change, we have to innovate, we have to bring arts and whatever. So you present this huge plan, very ambitious and admirable, and people stop too much. But if you think instead of the ocean, think of a little, a little, not even a pond, a little bit of water. You can just step over it. No problem. I can do that. Oh, that was fun. So think of little puddles instead of oceans, and just take people through those puddles in a way that makes people feel comfortable, that has an effect, and from there build to the next step. So I think it's very important, especially for young people as they work in companies. I always say, before you want to change the world, just check what the toilets are. As in the sense of, before you do anything, observe what's around you, observe the dynamics, observe how things are working, and then within that culture, bring in your own self.
Great. And Anila has teary eyes, she says. I hope that people have enjoyed this webinar and that other people also have teary eyes or some other appropriate response to it. Thank you very much, Daniel.
It's a Join EBBF link, so that from tears you can get to membership and just become a stronger group. And
then from membership to action.
Exactly. And people like Nabil, like Bahid, like Jean, all these great members in the call that really are showing how making things happen is just so much more fun, so much better when you do it with other people, with this idea of really being of service to the world around you.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. And join us also next week for another webinar that I hope you will enjoy.
In fact, if just a moment, if I can just share my screen again, because that's very important, because we do not just have anybody, but we have Jean, who is presenting next week. So June 6th, same time at 1 Eastern time, building economically cohesive communities in the time of the Corona pandemic. So Jean Parker from interviewer becomes the speaker.
I will be on the hot seat for sure.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thanks everybody for joining us.